Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. I have finally painted all of the Gundam Assemble minis that came in the starter decks that they released around mid-2025. It's taken me a while to do it. I've procrastinated, I've done other projects, and it was just something that I wanted to do in the background and get good at. Learned a lot along the way. These are by no means perfect. Some of them are not even finished, but this is my current skill level as of recording of this video. Now, I say I painted all of the figures. I did technically miss out on painting the Skygrasper. I am painting it, but I just haven't finished it just yet because it's sort of like the most boring out of them once I've done all the others. That being said, I did get a second set of the seed kits specifically so I could have a full like Ale Striker Pack Gundam, as well as still do the Launch Strike and have the Sword Strike as well. Then I didn't want to keep the same color scheme and I changed it. We'll be getting into it. So between the 4 packs, you got 3 miniatures each pack, so a total of 12 miniatures. If you're using the optional parts for the Strike Gundams and you have an extra set, like I said, then there's a total of 13 miniatures released at once. There will be another 2 card packs that they've announced so far that will also come with miniatures, being Iron-Blooded Orphans as well as G-Quacks. And then we will hopefully hear about the actual Gundam Assemble tabletop board game, or however it manifests, sometime in 2026. I'm pretty much all in on that already, given the quality of these minis and sort of the ease of painting and the whole process. I do like how it all turned out. So let's get into it. So here is the RX-78 Classic Granddaddy Gundam. This was sort of what I started with for the miniature painting. Partway through, I did take a big break because painting white at a miniature scale is harder than I thought. And I learned a lot while I was painting this model. I actually screwed it up the first time and I decided to restart. I used Paint Stripper, cleaned the whole thing, and started fresh. And what you're seeing here is my sort of finished attempt at a sort of like a middle tier skill level, I'd say, because at this point I had started fresh, done it again, and painted some of the minis in the meantime after learning a lot, because I wanted to save a lot of the Gundams that were white bodied till later while I built up my skills, my precision and things like that. So this is indicative of a later skill set that I sort of built up while painting all of these. But I do think it turned out pretty good. It does sort of edge more to the grey side than it does the white side, but it does give a sort of more worn out, like battle-worn sort of look, which I do actually quite like. Now for paints, I mostly used Vallejo paints the whole way, a lot of from the Squidmar starter sets, just because that's a good spread of paints and they're very easy to work with. And there were some instances of Army Painter Speed Paint 2.0 here or there, not a huge amount, but it is there. So overall, I think I did a pretty good job. It's not perfect by any means, especially in like the beam rifle. I didn't do the scope very well at all. That's something that I've been working on since then. It depends on the style that I'm going for. A lot of the Gundams I wanted to go for like flat anime style instead of shiny metallics or non-metallic metals or anything like that. I wanted to go, sort of as anime as I could, sometimes cel shading, sometimes not, just sort of going with the flow and seeing how it goes. But things like detailing the faces, I really enjoyed that. They are slightly bigger than Warhammer models, just by like a tiny bit, at least if you're comparing Space Marines. So the faces were actually surprisingly easy to get into, and because I don't need to worry about facial details like building skin tones and things like that, the actual process wasn't too bad. Because painting the eyes, painting the sort of like cheeks underneath, and then painting the faceplates was actually fine, because you sort of build inwards out. So it's like you paint the eyes first, then you paint the cheeks, then you paint the faceplate. So you just sort of build, and you create all that detail as you go along. Yes, it's easy to spill and easy to make mistakes, but it's also easy to correct. Again, why I like Vallejo paints, they're water-based. You can fix it super easily. But that was sort of how I wanted to start this video and start off discussing these Gundams. Now, next up was Gun Cannon. Now, Gun Cannon, not my favorite model, not my favorite Gundam design. Could have used more paint, absolutely. Some of these coats weren't as thick as I wanted them to be, but it is honestly one of the more interesting Gundam designs because it's crouching down, there's terrain for it, this is like its proper like launching pose, and looks quite nice. I enjoyed painting the rocks. The body, I used a red speed paint just to get it all covered and then touched it up here or there, using some dark grey just to finish up my mistakes, and then trying to paint the face as best I could. It didn't turn out perfect, but for one that I didn't care as much about, I think it turned out quite good. Now, I did leave all of the bases as the black puck that it comes with, just because I don't know how the system for Gundam Assemble will actually work, so I don't want to invest too much in the bases if we're going to, work with hexagons or something else. What's, legal in an actual game? Am I actually going to play tournament play for whatever this tabletop game is? Just wanted to leave it as bare bones as I could so I can fix it later and change it. Then we have the gun tank, and this one I think turned out pretty alright as well. Not super happy with how I did the head, but the colors pop very nicely, very like anime colors, very solid, blocky, and I like that look quite a bit. I also like the cannons being in different poses. It is a fairly simple design, but so are pretty much all of the classic Gundam looks, and this one just has simple colors that are very eye-catching, and you can see how this design has stood the test of time. Looks very classic, and I think it turned out quite good. And here's our trio. This is from the Heroic Beginnings starter set, so the very main starter set, and they look all good together. And, when you put the RX-78 next to them, it makes the grey look a lot more white, so I do like that. It's all about readability of the model. Moving on to Zeon's Rush, I've got Char's Zaku, and this one, again, Vallejo paints. I used salmon pinks, and he does look a little bit more pinkish than he does red in person, but this was sort of as close as I could get it without mixing too many colors together. I wanted to keep it as simple as possible while I'm building up skills. This was effectively the actual first model that I finished when I took my break from stripping paint for the RX-78. So, base coating, a little bit of layering because I had a rose pink as well as a salmon pink, so I was seeing how they sort of behaved together. Some slight washes and some slight edge highlighting to bring out the detail, because a lot of that is, hidden in very, very soft and light colors. So I tried to bring it out where I could, and then after that I touched up the paint even more with the salmon pink to clean up any line work that I was messy with. Painting the mono eye was actually surprisingly easy. It just needed a steady hand, and again, Vallejo paint's easy to clean up because it's all acrylic. So if you make a mistake, easy to tidy up. If you make a mistake, it's also black surrounding the mono eye, so that is very easy to paint because blacks are usually quite opaque. So you can tidy up mistakes fairly easily on Gundam kits, especially with very solid, blocky designs, nice curvatures here or there. Just very beginner friendly, especially with poses like this. Then I moved on to the Zakus, and this one I used sponge painting. So I would get a makeup sponge, load it up with paint, and sponge it all over the model to do my base coat, because Zaku's are majority, like 80 to 90% all the same color. So I got a nice dark green as the base coat, sponged it all over, then went in with a sort of khaki green and sponged it in sort of like the higher areas. So if the first coat covered like 90% of the model, leaving the shadows, then the second coat probably covered about 70 to 80% of the model, just enough to leave the shadows there and give a nice depth of color. So I didn't need to go over with panel lining or anything like that. That was all naturally done for me, and I think it turned out really, really nice. The Heat Hawk as well as the Bazooka both painted in the exact same style and turned out fantastically. Again, the mono eye was very easy to paint. Did it in the same way, and I think that the pink of the mono eye pops quite a bit more with the sort of military colors of the base Zakus. I did get another set of these Zakus. I haven't painted them up yet, but I think it would be nice to play with the color scheme a little bit more, and maybe do some Warhammer stuff, because I saw Mecha Gaikotsu did a cool Warhammer style for the Zakus. and I like that idea quite a bit, but we'll see if I do that. I did also matte top coat all of these figures with Green Stuff Worlds and Max Matte, which is an amazing paint, and they all look fantastic. Moving on to the Gundam wing set, I forgot what the wing set is called. Weirdly enough, as a Gundam wing set, it only has the sort of villain mechs. So we've got the Talgeese as well as the Leos, we've got a ground type as well as a flight type. And it was an interesting lineup, honestly, because it's almost, another Xeon type thing, even though it's not Xeon in wing, but having, antagonist mechs and no hero mech was an interesting choice, and I guess it sort of matches with the theming that they were doing with the Gundam decks of having the hero one, then the villain one, then a hero one, then a villain one, with Seed being another hero set and Wing being a villain set. I guess that's probably what they went for, and we know that they are going to be doing Gundam Wing models because there's a few, cool promo images of a Wing Zero floating around from the Endless Waltz movie, as well as a Death Scythe, I believe, from some of the promo stuff they've done. So we know that they'll do more. It's just a matter of when, and I guess if they were going to do a set, you'd have to have all 4 of the main suits, but these sets only come with 3 models, so 1 would be missing, so I guess it would be awkward that way, so they probably ended up landing on this. Now, the Talgeese, I painted quite a bit into it. I had a little bit of trouble getting the white right. This is while I was still figuring things out. I did a mix of speed painting as well as sponge painting, and gave this really deep, worn, dirty look to it. I think it looks fine. I'm not the biggest fan of it. Looks better at a distance, just because it is a bit messy and it was hard to clean up. If you let speed paint settle, it stains, so it's very difficult to work with. And I was still learning that. I used the speed paint Holy White, I think, for majority of this, as well as Pro Acryl's Titanium White, because that's super good for like pure whites to clean up things in edge highlight. So I used that for a majority of this model, fixing it up. It is also a bit of a tricky model to paint in general, just because of the way the weight's distributed on the base. So he does make it a little hard to paint here or there. In general, it was fine, but just something that I noted. All of these models I did, or at least most of the models, I did also do painting in separate assemblies, just so I could get at certain areas a bit easier. Mainly doing the sub-assembly thing. I don't do that too much with Warhammer because they use glue, and it's a little hard to work with if I'm trying to get a certain look or things like that. I prefer painting the whole model. But for Gundam, because it's all snap fit and it is Gundam plastic, which is super good for snap fit, I was fairly confident in doing sub-assembly stuff, and that was fine. Now the Leos, I think they turned out the best out of all of my models besides the Zaku's, in particular the ground type Leo. Now again, used the sponge method, used pretty much the exact same colors as the Zaku's, so a nice dark green and then a sort of khaki military green on top. Left some beautiful shadows on the model, then I made a bright piercing yellow eye, and then just tried to correct all the other colors, so painting the feet and the shoulders, and any other like little bits and joints that I needed to do, and it looks beautiful. I wasn't ready for it to look this good, and it's also funny as well because the ground type Leo in particular, the sculpt is a little bit awkward because like one of the arms juts out massively, but because of the way I painted it, the shadows sort of cut off at the excess plastic, so it makes it look like a shadow instead of making the arm look absurdly huge. So I am very, very happy with that. It's a very happy accident. I've noticed that a lot of like the best stuff with painting comes through happy accidents, and you learn a lot on the job while you're doing that. And this is one of those cases where I was so impressed by how it turned out and didn't think that it would turn out anywhere near as good. So I'm very happy about that. I wanted to go as far as I could without an airbrush, just because I'm a little bit hesitant about using one. I don't know why. I'm sort of like rebuilding my skills from my Gundam painting days, and airbrushing is something that I'm just not doing just yet, but sponges give a similar effect with a lot more miniature control, so I do like that quite a bit. Now the flight type Leo, or the space type Leo, whatever it's called, I didn't get the color as correct as I would like, but the method still worked the same, so sponges and everything like that. I do think it is a nice model. I do like the actiony pose. And the colors in general do pop nicely. Looks, very anime. It's just that the purple is probably a little bit too saturated. I think I could have gone a little bit darker, or like a few shades different. But in general, it turned out perfectly fine, and I do think it looks quite nice. Again, same method that I used for the other Leo, just trying to match the colors as best I could. Now onto the last set, which is the Seed Strike set. Now this one was the one that allowed for option sets, so you get the Skygrasper as well as 2 Striker Gundams, and if you swap out the parts to the Launcher Striker pack, you can swap it into the Ale Striker pack. You've got 2 alternate arms as well as an alternate backpack. You do angle the head differently, and it changes the entire vibe of the model, which is really cool as well. Now, I didn't want to paint 3 Strike Gundams exactly the same. It'd be a little bit tedious, especially since one of them is, sharing, 60-ish% of the same sculpt. I didn't want to do, the same whites and greys and everything like that, so I thought I would turn one into the Strike Rouge, so I did that with the Ale Striker pack. I used the same colors that I used for the Shah Zaku, so not exactly the right colors that should have been used, but close enough to give that same effect. Really enjoyed painting this one up, and I think it turned out quite good. The bold colors look really nice when you put it next to the Launcher Striker, and it's like most of this is the exact same model. They look nothing alike. Yes, the colors are different, but like they just give off completely different vibes, which I think is cool. But in general, I think I did that pretty okay. Weirdly enough, the Strike Rouge was the first one that I painted out of the Strike set, mainly because, again, I was scared of doing whites, and I was still slowly building up my skill set, but I think that turned out quite nicely. The Launcher Striker Gundam was the last one that I did, and I think I nailed the face. I was really, really happy with how I did that one, especially since it seems like my brush control's gotten way better. I don't think I've necessarily finished with this model. I think I should detail up the cannon a bit more, shade it a little bit more here or there, but I don't think it's like wholly complete. But I do think it does look quite nice regardless, and the dark green cannon does break up the bright whites and deep blues that you see with the actual Strike design. Then we've got the Sword Striker pack, which I think turned out okay as well. I might touch up the beam effect to give it a little bit more vibrancy, but in general, I think it turned out quite nicely. All of the small detail work on the Strike is a little tricky and a little intimidating, especially around the legs, but I think I found a nice little zen balance of how to do it, and anything that I over painted I could just touch up with a little bit of titanium white here or there, because then it would work as an edge highlight, so that was cool. And I think in general, the models are fairly forgiving in their poses and things like that you can get a lot done. And that is my experience with the Gundam Assemble models. I had a lot of fun with them, I had some ups, had some downs, but in general, I think it was a really great learning experience. It's the whole process of getting good at painting was specifically for these. And through that process, I discovered a love for miniature painting and projects that I really, really enjoyed doing. Like I painted a Warhammer-themed chess set where I got a cheap magnetized chessboard and stuck magnets in a bunch of Space Marines and painted them up as Ultramarines and Blood Ravens because I really like Dawn of War, and just set them against each other, found enough pawn style Space Marines to fill in a front row, and then found enough unique models here or there to fill in the rest, like putting a Terminator as a rook and things like that, and having unique captains as like the kings and queens. Like, it was a really fun process. I did film a bunch of that, but I'm not sure if I'll make a video on it besides the YouTube short that I did. But that was a lot of fun, and I've got a whole love for miniature painting and Warhammer. I've got a million different board games that I kickstarted over the years that I've been practicing painting on, and now that I can finally paint, it's nice to have painted minis when I play, like the Dark Souls board game, or maybe the Bloodborne board game, or the Monster Hunter board game. The Monster Hunter board game I haven't painted yet, and I really, really want to paint the minis, and I think it would be really, really cool to do. I need to get a little bit better at, like fur and texturing, but I think that one will be a really, really nice one to fully paint up at some point, especially since they'll be doing the Iceborne expansion, or new game entirely. It's more than just an expansion. Even the Elden Ring board game, when they do all those expansions, will be cool. I need to paint the Elden Ring board game, but yeah, this whole thing, just building up these skills for Gundam, is great because it made me appreciate everything that goes into it. It made me fall in love with the hobby to a point where I will actively just do it because it's fun. And I'll be prepared for when they do the other Gundam ones. I am terrified of the G-Quax ones because if I thought the Strike Gundams had a lot of detail, G-Quax is insane. It's going to take, a lot of focus to get that anywhere near looking good. But I am keen to try it. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed that video, and I will see you all next time.